3, 2. Okay, we are live. It says we're live, and hello and good afternoon, everybody. And
I feel live.
We're live, and we got Tim here as well. And so, question we get a lot, and I know JP's I hope JP's watching, or he'll catch up with this in a minute. Why does the S meter not work? Well, the S meter works fine, but how does an S meter work, and why does an S meter on a flex radio with a 3 kilohertz wide bandwidth read about S4 or S5, right? Normally, you plug in a dummy load or short it, it's about the value. I know why. I sort of understand why, as I was saying earlier, but I can't really explain why. And I can know how to test to make sure it's working correctly. So, Tim, and we can bring up Smart SDR. We got an example we're going to show you here. And I'm going to learn something because I can't wait for this. So Tim, tell us about how we calculate an S meter and what's different maybe than what we grew up with in a superhet radio and why it's different.
Okay, so first things first, we're sponsored today by Zaxby's. This is one of these things that I do. I need to make sure that I have my drink available.
My boss is probably going to call me about that.
Yeah, probably. So just let them know that that we're getting some residuals for that.
You should know it's her by now.
Yeah. So so the S meters is a really good question. There's the answer is it takes a little bit to get to the finish line, but we'll get started with it. So the first thing is that the S meter is not an arbitrary scale. I mean, you can go look this up in Google, and it will tell you that an S1 is, and I'm doing this from memory, I believe it's like negative 137 dBm or something like that.
There's a whole Wikipedia on it, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And so there's a defined scale. S9 actually means something, and that's a good thing. But the problem that we get into is that the radios that you and I grew up with, there was no real easy way to measure RF power. And so the designers of these radios did a little cute trick. And what they would do is they would look at the AGC voltage in the radio, because these are all analog circuits, and would derive an S value based on an AGC value, or AGC voltage.
Automatic gain control. And this is why on older radios, when you turn the AGC off, your S meter pings to full scale.
Yes, exactly. And so this is the way they did it. And, and they did a fairly good job of, calibrating their AGC voltages based on this known scale. And it worked okay. But then along came software-defined radios. And the one thing about a software-defined radio is that when you're digitizing RF, you have a whole lot more visibility into the actual RF power because you're digitizing it. You have that information available to you.
It's all about the power and the passband, right?
Right.
Okay.
And so one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, and I guess if you thought about it hard enough, you would, is that our radios are nothing more than spectrum analyzers with a transmitter built into it. And so we calculate the S meter value in the same way that a spectrum analyzer measures RF power.
Now, I gotta interrupt you. JP said you got to get a spectrum analyzer on this because this is what makes sense, and we're not really set to bring one in as a video. But a spectrum analyzer, by the way, is your Flex Radio is a spectrum analyzer, but that's carry on.
So essentially how a spectrum analyzer works is that you take a unit bandwidth of spectrum, and then with an ADC, analog to digital converter, we are digitizing the RF that's within that unit bandwidth. And so when you're looking at it on a display, what you're actually seeing, when you see all the little display jumping around, what you're seeing is that signal after it's been processed by a fast Fourier transform, or an FFT. and we take the FFT and we break the spectrum up into lots of little chunks and little pieces.
The bins that we saw in the 5,000 days in Power SDR.
This is the bins,
okay.
And so so each pixel that is on the display represents an FFT bin, and essentially all an FFT bin does, or all an FFT does, is that it calculates it looks at the power based on the spectrum bandwidth. And so, since you have a little slice of spectrum, and we're measuring the power in that little slice of spectrum, and a unit bandwidth is a bunch of those little bins or those little chunks of spectrum, all lined up against one another or next to one another to show a waveform. What we essentially do is that we do what's called integrating the power of those bins. And essentially, we are adding up the RF power that's in each one of those little pieces of FFT, those little FFT bins.
Little bins. How wide is a bin?
So a bin, really, the width of a bin is going to be dependent on several things. One, in our radios, it's going to be dependent on the radio itself. Our different models sample at different frequencies, have different sampling rates, and that's part of it. The other part of it is how much you're zoomed into a spectrum, because the more you zoom in, the smaller the FFT bin bandwidth size is. And so it depends. It can be down around the 1-2 hertz range, which is pretty good resolution. And then way zoomed out, it could be tens of hertz. So it really depends on the spectrum. So when we calculate an S meter, after all this technical mumbo jumbo, when we calculate the S meter, what we're doing is, and I'll just use a standard example. If you had a single sideband, if you had your radio configured for single sideband, and you had a 500 hertz receive filter, then what we're doing is, and let's just say that we've got our radio configured so that one FFT bin is 1 hertz. So we have 500 little FFT bins that are now representing, we have 5,000 little FFT bins I had said 500 hertz, right? So there's 500. Yeah, doing the math in my head wrong. So there's 500 FFT bins that are contained within that 500 hertz filter. And so we can very easily add up what the power level is, because we have that information digitally, and so we add all of that up, and we then display that as part of the S meter, because we add that up. The power level is done in dBm, and so we calculate that number, and then we convert dBm into an S number. And so this is the part of the play here where Mike's going to go bring up the Smart SDR display, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. And so Mike, why don't you go and change to a 500 hertz filter, because that's what I've been talking about. And,
all right. Well, what we'll do is we'll go to CW.
Yep.
And then we'll pick up a 500 hertz filter. And do you want me to zoom in some more?
Yeah, sure. Zoom in a little bit more. There we go. That's pretty good size.
And then so,
yeah,
up here where the S1 is.
Right. And so right now, this, we are you're incredibly fortunate to look at a radio that is in a location that has an incredibly low noise floor, and we would all kill to have a negative minus 40 dBm signal on 20 meters at this time of day. But
actually, hold on. I just noticed something. Let me turn the tuner off. But it's the same. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're seeing an S1 here, right?
So you're seeing an S1 level and everything. And so what we're going to do is the S meter has the ability to show S units and dBm. So we're going to go and we're going to change this to dBm. because this is a linear scale.
And I clicked on it. That's all I did. You can switch back.
Yep. And so what we're seeing here is that within this 500 hertz filter, there is essentially a negative 116, 117 dBm of RF power within this filter. And so to prove that we're looking at power within the filter, I'm going to have Mike change this to a 3K filter. So
okay. Tim has a question, by the way, is why the noise floor in the spectroscope moves up and down as you zoom in and out?
Why does the spectrum...
Why does the noise floor on the spectrum move up and down as we zoom in and out?
Oh, okay. So the answer to that is that there is some magic that we can do with decimation with the DSP, and this is a little bit beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But as you zoom in and everything, the little the FFT bins get smaller, and so when you make those little bins smaller, there is less noise per bin. And so because we're integrating the RF power, and RF power in that FFT bin is a combination of noise and signal. And so so as you zoom in, there is less noise in each FFT bin, and as you add up those bins and you have less noise, the representation of the noise floor goes down.
Okay. Now we're at 500. You wanted me to go to where?
Let's go to 3K. That'll.
Let's go to 3K. So we're going to go way wide.
Yeah, we're going to go way wide.
You know, and clicking on the broadcast screen does absolutely nothing.
Okay. Yes.
And I zoom out one?
Nope, that's fine. So
okay.
you'll notice that we made the filter a whole lot bigger, and our dBm signal went from a negative 116 all the way up to negative 108 dBm.
Almost 10 dB, 8 to 10 dB.
And we also went from an S1 to an S3. So go ahead and click on the dB. Let's go back to the S meter so we can see that difference.
Clicking on the wrong screen.
We'll get this right eventually, Mike. And so we've basically gone from S1 to S3 by doing absolutely nothing but changing the size of the filter. And so this basically reinforces the concept that what we're doing is we're looking at this RF power within the within a unit bandwidth on the spectrum display. Now, you're going to get a lot of people, and we get a lot of talk about this, is that, you know, when you disconnect the antenna, there should be zero S0 because there's no signal. Well, that's not true because we all live in the real world. And we are permeated by an electromagnetic field. It is everywhere. There is RF noise that comes that is atmospheric. There's RF noise that is man-made around you. There's RF noise that is cosmic. It comes from space. It's everywhere. And so the only way to actually reduce the amount of RF signal that the radio can receive, and the radio is incredibly sensitive, would be to put the radio into essentially a chamber that is RF immune. So we're talking about a Faraday cage. And then because there's also electrical noise inside the radio, I mean, components generate noise. That's always there too. Then you're going to need to take the radio and you're going to need to bathe it in liquid helium. And once you get the radio at that cold, then you may actually see, an S value that is essentially S0 when you disconnect the antenna.
So simply put, a true S0 is a measurement of no noise present.
So well, a true S, like I said, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I believe an S0 is like a negative 141 or 142 dBm, and that's pretty darn low to be able to get down to an S0. Although we can simulate an S0 here. Mike, let's go.
Okay.
Put it on 50 hertz and see what.
Okay,
See what
so I
we
got
get
it.
to.
By the way, so an S1 is 0.2 microvolts RMS relative to 50 ohms at minus 121. And according to the wiki. And I just quickly, hopefully I brought up the right one.
So let's click on the 50 hertz filter and see how low we can
back
go.
up. So let's go back. So we'll go to the 50. Okay.
And so let's click on the S. So hey, we hit S0. And then so we're at
124.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we're pretty low. And to get S0, and if you disconnect your antenna, if you put your antenna on transverter port or an unterminated.
Flip over to RXA where on this radio there's no antenna.
It might drop a little bit more.
We dropped a little bit.
Yeah, so we're down to near 130 dBm in a 50 hertz filter. So you can get close to. I mean, you're reading an S0 there. So
what this is, by the way, so this is a Flex 6700, and the antenna is a HF6V vertical, nothing special, at about the end of 80 or 90 feet of the equivalent of LMR 400.
No, not bad.
Crap load of radials all through a swamp and a mess. So,
like I said, I'd love to have a negative 130 dBm noise floor on 20 meters at my QTH.
Right, and to show that there are signals out there. If I zoom out, you will see them pop in.
Yeah, let's go find some signals and
let's go to our. This is typical. 20 meters could be dead, and then there's here, and that might be 14074.
Oh, I wonder if that's FT8.
Yeah. Oops.
I was going to say, if it disappears for 15 seconds and comes back, then we know what it is.
Okay, so we'll go back to up to 074, and actually we're in CW, so we'll change mode over to DigiU, and lo and behold, we have energy being measured up to minus 109.
Yeah, pretty strong.
Now, we didn't prep for this, but since we're looking at this and asking a question, one of the things we do better than your typical superhet is the ability to hear weak signals beside very loud signals.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, that's called dynamic range. And that's something that in an older radio is really hard to do because you've got this automatic gain control trying to reduce your gain at the same time killing your weak signal, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
Because we have our bins, does that not give us the ability to deal with the loud signal here, but not clamp down the gain on the weak signal beside it?
Well, actually, it does. The AGC algorithm that we use in our radios is very unique. It's called a dual track algorithm, and so what we're able to do is we're able to analyze these signal levels in these FFT bins that are within a unit bandwidth. When I say unit bandwidth, I mean the receive filter. And so one of the things that you want to do is that there's not just one type of signal that affects the volume or the gain within the receive passband. And anybody who has operated, during the summer has heard lightning crashes, and these are very high energy, short duration pulse type noise, QR Nancy, and QRM, and so.
By the way, I guarantee what we're looking at is lightning crashes because there is one big honking storm headed our way, and it's
yeah. Look,
these horizontal lines.
Yeah, I was going to say it certainly looks like lightning crashes on the pan adapter, and so what our dual track algorithm does is that we're listening for changes in volume or changes in gain throughout the passband, and we're looking for for volume changes that are incredibly short duration, and then we're looking for volume changes that are longer duration. So, for example, if you're operating sideband, you're on 40 or 80 meters, and at night, and somebody's talking, they talk. There's a lot of signal, but in between at some point you have to breathe. You have to pause for words and stuff. So it's not a continuous signal. It's a signal of varying gain. However, while you're talking, there's also a incredibly large lightning crash that hit where the signal jumped up twofold or something, and
like
so
this guy right here.
Yeah. So our AGC essentially is dual track, and what we will do is we're listening for those loud pulse noises, and we'll clamp those down without clamping down the volume of the rest of the signals in the passband, and so that helps out a lot by while you're talking, that the weak station that you're listening to, the AGC doesn't reduce the volume down, so you can't hear that weak station during that momentary loud pulse of noise. Unfortunately, in order for the AGC to work properly, you have to have
I want to interrupt you right now. So this is from lightningmaps.org. And if you haven't looked at lightning maps, it's just really cool. But you can see this stuff coming over Lake Huron or Georgian Bay into Lake, and then over Georgian Bay's here, Georgia, and then into Lake Huron. And these are the crashes we're hearing. I'm going to bring this back up, Tim, because I want to show this to you. And I had a question from somebody else as well. From Tim again. Why is the noise floor on the Spectroscope moves up and down as you zoom in and out? We did that one. Oh, follow on. Here, I'll just post it. But wouldn't even light cause some level of noise? Absolutely true. If it was in our receiver passband.
Exactly. I was going to say the frequency of light is so much higher than what our analog to digital converter is digitizing that it's insignificant.
The other thing I was going to say. If I bring, I'll bring Smart SDR back up in a minute. But if I was to pull out a TS850, a Kenwood, with this going on, I would be seeing my S meter slamming over all the time and saying, "What'd you say? What'd you say?" Because your automatic gain control would clamp down the receiver, meaning shutting down its ability to receive, and then it would slowly decay, and the gain would come back, and then it gets slammed again like a wave on a beach, and this is why, while if you're listening to a net or something and you'll hear people always say, "What'd you say?" The lightning crash took you out. I don't notice lightning crashes anymore. I mean, I hear them. They're a bit of a click, but they're not the same.
Yeah. So the follow on here is that with the AGC, the key thing is setting the AGC threshold correctly. And I believe we talked about this a little bit the last time we got together. Where you want to decrease the AGC threshold down to the point when you're listening to a portion of the band that has no signal, you want to decrease it until you are no longer hearing the AGC increasing the volume of noise.
Right. And that's a couple of places.
Yep.
Right yet. This is the AGC threshold here. I've got it set at 55. That's actually, I know that it's a little hot. You get to know your station. And you can set that in two places. That's one place. And the other place, somebody turned off the RX tab, is right here. You'll see when I move it, it moves in both places.
Yep.
And I can't imagine it ever being above 50 on a low band.
So, yeah, it really, I very rarely am above about 45 on any band. I know that like on 6 meters where I'm at, I'm fairly in a fairly quiet area for 6 meter noise, which is amazing. And I know that that if I'm pointing my antenna west, which is lower noise than if I point it north, that my AGCT is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 23 or 24.
Right. And it's in the manual how to set that.
Yes, it's in the manual how to set that. There's also a nice article in the help desk that talks about that also.
Good. Okay. I think we sort of touched on everything. I always wonder how to do AGC and FT8 when you're not really listening, and I think you turn it off. No, you don't actually. That's old school. And that's because of the gain control. The old school in the superhit world, you turn the AGCT off that you got it all and let WSJT engines manage the loud signals with the weak signals, which it did an okay job with. In the flex world, the correct way is dial off the frequency a bit, slide your AGC to 0, and increase it until you hear the noise increase. It's 3 dB, but what that means is a noticeable increase. That's the high level way of doing it, pretty much, right, Tim?
Yeah.
And then leave it there. Now go back to whatever WSJT FT8, FT4 frequency you're on, and leave it alone for a while.
Yeah, and I normally set my the attack on the AGC when I'm operating digital modes to slow. So there is a fixed option, and essentially the fixed option caps the amount of gain or volume that the AGC will apply to a signal, and that's absolutely what you don't want to do on a digital mode. So I normally operate with FT8. I normally operate slow. The only time I ever change that to a faster attack release is that if I'm on the lower bands and there is, like lightning strikes that are happening that might be kind of wiping things out, I want the AGC to react quickly and recover quickly because I know that's the kind of noise that I'm wanting to get rid of.
There we go. So yeah, there's so old school, new school. Yes, almost. When will we ever turn AGC off in a flex radio? I can't think of a reason. Other than hacking around and testing something, and
there's some possibilities if you're using some outboard analog equipment, modems or things like that, where you wanted to have a fixed maximum level audio gain. That is one possibility. But in general, I never used fixed or turned it off.
Okay. And Don, November 5 Sierra Kilo Tango, I said there's a lot of misinformation. Well, yeah, welcome to the internet. If you're looking at our community, you'll get to know who you can trust. And I keep starting to say this a fair bit, that you'll know, in the community, you want to watch for our Elmers. They understand the technology, and if you don't understand and somebody says do this, don't hesitate to challenge why. And if you don't get an answer, you can email us. I actually have a banner here, so let me put this up because email us at info, and we'll be happy to help you out or provide direction with the radio, how it works. The manual, all 200 and X amount of pages, is well worth. You can't read it all, but as I said, it was on Facebook the other day. Print it off, take it to Kinko's or something. It's not expensive to print in black and white. It's like $25 or so. They do a nice Surlox binding, and you leaf through it. Of course, I'm a geek. When I got my ham handbook, my first one as a kid, I must have turned every page. I didn't necessarily read anything, and I went, "Oh, cool, stuff about antennas. Connectors." You get the idea, and that's where I use it as a reference to get going with stuff like that. So
I was just looking in my bookshelf for my 1957 handbook. I can't find it.
Go back I went to 74, I think, and I still have it, and a bunch in between. Well, so the handbooks are.
I was going to say the only reason I have the 57 is because my first Rockbound CW transmitter was a kit. Or not a kit, but was a project described in that handbook, and I had to go replace the inductors in it to get it to work. So it's here in my bookshelf somewhere.
Yes, you do use AGC comp. You don't use any compression in digital modes. Here's the question Ryan's answering. So,
okay, so that's a good question. So the compression in our radios is actually a CESS, And when you're using DigiU, which is the mode that you should always use for any digital mode, we turn off any of that audio processing. We turn the EQ off. We turn all the compression off so that there is no DSP signal manipulation done. What you're getting is directly out of the modulator from the digital mode software.
Okay, and at risk of opening a big can of worms for Jeff Wood, who wanted to ask about all mode squelch, yes, we're well aware of it. In the meantime, if you run FR Stack, there is a S meter squelch built into FR Stack that might help you out in the time being, Jeff, and how to set it up. So perfect. Cool. Well, that's all I have today. This was a 10-minute conversation, lasted 30. From the comments I'm seeing, I'm sure it helped out, and I don't want to say go, RTFM, go read the manual, but there is some cool stuff there that may.
It's a great reference. It's a great reference tool. It's
written in English. Yes. I say cautiously, but it's easy to understand, and we're, like I said, the company's here. If I can't answer it, Tim can't answer it, I can reach out to, Eric, the VP of engineering. He usually answers me fairly quickly unless he's up to his neck in something. And we'll try to get you to the answers that help. And it's a bit of it was a challenge for me. I think I'm pretty technically smart in a global sense, but I jokingly say I go to lunch with these guys when I'm in Austin, and I have to sit there and just listen because they're in a whole new crowd about how to process RF. And I think the what we hear and what we've got is, you have a lab grade piece of equipment that you get to talk on as well.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say, when you're in Austin, you don't ask what time it is because you'll get a dissertation on how a watch works.
I won't tell you. He'll tell you that. What a great bunch of people, though. We have an awesome time together. And
yeah. Well, I was going to say, I had fun doing this. If you guys out there, if you want to hear, Mike and I banter about on something else, send him an email at the info@flexradio.com, and we'll have a couple of more of these impromptu get-togethers and chat about how the radio works.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. Have a good day, and hope everybody worked a bunch of guys on 6 meters yesterday. That was just one of the. If I was at a real job, a different job, I couldn't really lie about. I got to test out the amplifier. It's going to take me all day trying to heat it up. I worked some Europeans, and I actually worked some new Canadian. I worked a Canadian province, but I don't know where the BC guys were. Where are your V7s? I could see you working, but turn the beam east.
Yeah, I've been. Whenever I see any double hop skip come out on 6, I'm all over it because being on the East Coast. The grids that I need now are CM and CN, so it's few and far between. But I was able to get 10 new grids last week, so
cool.
I'm up to 320 on 6. So
oh wow! And hey Don, while you're waiting for your 6 meter antenna, try loading up your 40 meter dipole. If it resonates, you'll be surprised what you can work.
Yep. And I was going to say, and if you don't want to spend a lot of money on a 6 meter antenna and you don't have a big footprint. And I'm going to give somebody some cred for this. There's a company in North Carolina called Par Electronics that makes a stressed Moxon on 6 meters. It's got an incredibly low footprint. That's about the only kind of antenna I can use here on my little postage stamp piece of property, and it does incredibly well for a small 2-element 6 meter antenna. Like I said, I'm up to 320 grids on 6, and I've only been doing it for 2 years. So get on 6. It's fun.
And you got a little heater sitting behind you too, though.
Well, yeah, that helps.
Thanks, everybody. 73.
All right. Have a good one, Mike.
Right.
Bye.